793 CE, Lindisfarne, the raid that launched the Viking Age. Except it didn't. Because decades earlier, on a beach in Estonia, 40 warriors were already dead. 2 ships buried in sand, 42 bodies showing signs of violent death, shattered skulls, cut marks on bone, weapons still embedded in ribs. This wasn't 793, this was around 730 CE. A Swedish warband, brothers, crossing the Baltic under sail, dying in battle on foreign shores. 50 years before Lindisfarne. So here's the question that changes everything. If organized Viking raids existed in 730, what else was already in place? The answer is everything. The Viking Age didn't explode out of nowhere in 793. It was built, piece by piece, innovation by innovation, over 500 years. By the time a single longship beached at Lindisfarne, Scandinavia had already transformed itself 3 times over. First came the weapon, a 1,000-year evolution in ship design that culminated in a vessel that could cross oceans, surprise targets at dawn, and row 50 miles up rivers no other European ship could navigate. Then came the motive, the rise of commercial port cities that transformed Scandinavia from a gift exchange society into an economy hungry for one thing: silver. And finally came the proof, buried in Estonian sand, a receipt for organized maritime violence, complete with DNA evidence, sailed warships, and a warrior aristocracy we can trace back to their childhood homes. 3 regions were converging. The Danish kingdom, consolidating power, building the first commercial ports, projecting strength across the North Sea. Svear, the Mälaren Valley elite, masters of a warrior cult so powerful their burial customs would echo across continents. And the Norway, competing coastal chiefdoms along what would become Norway, locked in a maritime arms race that made seafaring a matter of survival. By 750 CE, all the pieces were on the board. The only question left was where they'd strike first. This is how the Viking Age was actually born.
A quick note on names. The political landscape of Scandinavia between 200 and 750 CE was nothing like today's map. Denmark, Sweden, and Norway existed as geographic regions, but not as unified nation-states. The Danes emerge as a political identity around 500 CE. The Svear, centered in what's now central Sweden, are attested in Roman sources. The region we call Norway was a patchwork of competing coastal chiefdoms. There was no unified Norwegian kingdom. When we use these names, we're referring to geographic regions and emerging political identities, not modern countries. Let's start with the machine that made everything possible: the longship. But here's what most people miss. The Viking ship wasn't invented by Vikings. It was the result of a 1,000-year evolution, with 3 breakthrough innovations stacking on top of each other. And the final piece, the one that changed everything, didn't snap into place until about 50 years before Lindisfarne.
(350 CE), the Nydam oak ship, found in what's now the Danish region. This is the first large Scandinavian vessel built using clinker construction, overlapping planks riveted together with iron. Why does this matter? Because clinker building creates a hull that's strong, light, and flexible all at once. The overlapping planks stiffen the structure without needing heavy internal framing. You get strength without weight. The Nydam ship could carry 36 to 45 rowers. It was fast in coastal waters, maneuverable. But it had no keel, no mast, no sail. It was a coastal rowing boat, impressive for its time, but not an ocean weapon. The chassis was perfected 400 years before Lindisfarne. So why did it take 4 centuries for the Viking Age to start? Because the Nydam ship was missing 2 things, and without them, it was just a very fast riverboat.
Fast forward to around 700 CE. The Kvalsund ship found along the North Way in what's now western Norway. Still clinker-built, but now it has something new, a keel. A keel does 2 things. First, it gives the hull longitudinal strength. It can handle rougher seas and won't fold in the middle during a storm. Second, and this is critical, it provides lateral resistance. That matters because you can't effectively sail without a keel. A simple square sail can push you downwind just fine, but if you want to tack across or even against the wind, you need a keel to stop the hull from being shoved sideways by the wind pressure. Without a keel, a sail just pushes you off course. The sail was adopted in Scandinavia in the 8th century, probably learned from Frisian or Roman-influenced traders who'd been using sails for centuries. And we know exactly when it arrived in the Baltic. The Salme II ship, dated to 700 to 750 CE. The rivet patterns prove it was a sailed vessel, the oldest sailed warship ever found in the Baltic and among the earliest evidence for sail adoption anywhere in Scandinavia. Now you had the full package. Clinker hull, light, strong, flexible. Keel, stability, ocean-worthy. Sail, strategic range, speed, and surprise. You could cross the North Sea under sail, conserving your rowers' energy for the actual raid. You could arrive at dawn when no one expected you. And here's the nightmare for every monastery in Europe. You could sail up rivers. The shallow draft meant you didn't need a harbour. You could beach on any stretch of sand. You could row 50 miles inland up the Thames, the Seine, the Shannon, waterways that were supposed to be natural defences. No other ship in Europe could do this. By 750 CE, the weapon was complete. But a weapon is useless without a reason to use it. In the 8th century, Scandinavia's economy fundamentally transformed, and that transformation is what turned raiding from a risky gamble into a business model. For centuries, the economy had been based on inland, central places, elite-controlled centres like Helgø in the Melloran region or Gudme in the Danish islands. Trade existed, but it was prestige trade. One-off exotic goods moving through elite gift exchange networks. A Buddha statuette from India found at Helgø. A Coptic scoop from Egypt. These weren't purchased. They were gifts exchanged between rulers to cement alliances. The economy was embedded in social hierarchy. You didn't buy things, you received them as marks of status. But around 700 CE, something radical happened. Ribe. Founded around 710 CE on the coast of Jutland in the Danish kingdom. This isn't a village that grew organically over generations. It's planned. Plots laid out in a grid for craftsmen. Designated areas for merchant stalls. Purpose-built docks. And from day one, they're using shiattas, the silver coins of Frisia and Anglo-Saxon England. Ribe wasn't just a port, it was a prototype. The first time Scandinavians built a city not around a king's hall, but around money. Furs and iron from Scandinavia, glass and wine from the Rhineland, amber from the Baltic, silver from everywhere. Ribe became the North Sea node, the place where Scandinavian goods met continental markets.
and around 750 CE, the Svear kings copied the model. Birka, founded in the Mälaren region, not on an inland lake anymore like the old elite centre at Helgö, on the coast, positioned to control the eastern trade routes, the rivers leading to the Rus territories, and eventually to the silver of the Islamic Caliphate.
Here's how you know these are commercial towns, not just elite centers. Weights, scales, hack silver. This is the toolkit of the merchant. You're not exchanging prestige gifts anymore. You're trading by weight. Silver for goods, goods for silver. The amounts doesn't matter. The weight does. And here's the thing about a commercial economy. It creates demand. Demand for exportable goods, furs, iron, amber, walrus ivory. And demand for silver. Because silver is how you buy imports. It's how you pay your crew. It's how you measure wealth in a world that's moving beyond land and livestock. Which means you need a reliable way to acquire silver. And in 750 CE, if you're a Scandinavian chief with a new sailed warship and a crew expecting payment, you start looking at the map differently. Summer, 730 CE. A beach on the Estonian island of Saaremaa. Something went very wrong. When archaeologists uncovered the site in 2008, they found 2 ships buried in the sand. Inside, 42 bodies. All male, mostly in their 30s and 40s, all showing signs of violent death. Cut marks on bones, shattered skulls, ribs pierced by weapons. This was a massacre. But here's where it gets strange. Whoever killed them didn't loot the bodies. They buried them with respect, with their weapons, with their ship. Why? The DNA told the first part of the story. 4 of the warriors in Salme 2 were brothers. A 5th was related to them, possibly an uncle. This wasn't a random crew of adventurers. This was a kin group, a family war band, the kind of tight-knit unit you'd expect for a high-risk expedition far from home. Isotope analysis told the second part. When you're a child, the geology and diet of where you grow up gets encoded in your teeth. It's like a chemical fingerprint of your homeland. The teeth of these warriors pointed to the Mälaren Valley, Svealand, central Sweden, the same region where archaeologists have found some of the wealthiest warrior burials in all of Scandinavia. These weren't farmers who picked up swords. These were elite warriors from the heartland of Svear power.
Salme 2 was 17 meters long, big enough for 30-40 men, and the rivet patterns on the keel and hull proved it had a mast, a sail. This is the oldest sailed warship ever found in the Baltic, among the earliest evidence for sail adoption anywhere in Scandinavia. It means a Svear warband from the Mälaren region crossed the Baltic under sail, decades before Lindisfarne. They died in battle, the trauma on the bones is unmistakable, and someone, probably the locals who killed them, buried them with the honour due to worthy enemies. Some scholars debate whether Salme was a raid or a diplomatic mission gone wrong, but that might be a false choice. High-status diplomatic missions in this period travelled as armed warbands. The lines between diplomacy and violence were blurry. What's undeniable is this. Technology, sailed clinker ship, check. People, Svear warrior elite, check. Organisation, multi-ship, kin-based warband, check. Activity, organised long-distance overseas violent expedition, check. Every single component of a Viking raid existed in 730 CE. Lindisfarne wasn't the invention of a new system. It was the export of an already established one.
So who built this system? By 750 CE, 3 distinct worlds had emerged in Scandinavia. Each developed its own power structure, its own economic model, its own reasons to look beyond their shores. Let's meet them. Start in the Danish region. Jutland, the islands of Zealand and Funen. Between 200 and 500 CE, this wasn't a unified kingdom. It was a patchwork of powerful chieftains competing for control of some of the richest farmland in Scandinavia. Places like Gudmay on Funen, a massive inland political and religious centre, controlled Roman gold, craft production and seasonal ports. But in the 5th century, something happened that would reshape the entire region. A mass migration. Imagine entire villages empty, farmsteads abandoned, whole communities packing their lives into boats and sailing west to Britain, never to return. Archaeological surveys show entire regions of Jutland depopulated during this period. The Angles, the Jutes, gone. And into that power vacuum stepped a new elite. By 500 CE, they were building something unprecedented. The great halls at Lyra on the island of Zealand. These weren't just buildings, they were statements of power.
Halls rebuilt again and again in the same location for 500 years, each one larger and more impressive than the last. The legendary seat of the Scyldings, the royal dynasty that would become synonymous with Danish power. This is where a new political identity was forged. The Danes, consolidating out of post-migration chaos into a kingdom capable of massive public works. By 737 CE, they'd expanded the Danivirke, a massive earthwork fortification marking the southern border of Danish territory, the kind of project that requires centralized authority and thousands of laborers. And by 710 CE, they'd founded Ribe. Denmark, by 750 CE, was the most politically centralized and economically sophisticated region in Scandinavia. 600 miles northeast, in the valleys around Lake Mälaren in central Sweden, a different kind of power was emerging. Here, 2 major groups dominated. The Svear, centered in Svealand around Lake Mälaren, and the Geats in Götaland to the south. The Svear built their power at Gamla Uppsala, Old Uppsala, the sacred center of Svealand. Monumental burial mounds that still dominate the landscape, visible for miles. But it's what's in the nearby graves that tells the real story. Vendel, Valsgerda.
These boat grave cemeteries contain some of the most spectacular warrior burials ever found in Europe. Picture this. You're standing at the edge of a freshly dug grave in 7th century Svealand. At the bottom lies a boat. Inside, a warrior in full regalia. A helmet so intricate it took master craftsmen months to make. Covered in gold foil and garnets that catch the light. Topped with a boar crest, symbol of warrior ferocity. A sword with a hilt wrapped in gold wire, worth more than a farm. The kind of weapon you inherit. A warhorse beside him, sacrificed for the journey. Gaming pieces carved from whalebone, entertainment for the afterlife. Even a falcon, a bird worth a fortune, killed and buried with him. This burial is a carefully staged performance, saying, this man was more than human. He was legend. And here's what makes it even more significant. These helmets are identical in style to the famous Sutton Hoo burial in England.
This isn't coincidence. This is proof of a shared warrior ideology that spanned the entire North Sea, an aristocracy that spoke the same language of power, from Svealand to East Anglia. Centuries later, perhaps as early as the 700s, perhaps as late as the 1000s, the poet of Beowulf would describe this exact world. Ring-givers, mead halls, warrior oaths, treasures buried with the dead. The Geats in Götaland are less visible archaeologically. Later sagas describe wars between the Svear and Geats, but archaeology suggests gradual political absorption under Svear hegemony, not a single dramatic conquest. By 750 CE, when the Svear kings founded Birka, they controlled the most important trade routes between the Baltic and the interior. They had the wealth, the ships, and the warrior ideology to project power across the sea. The Salme war band came from this world. Now, the region we call Norway. In this period, there was no unified Norway. The name itself, Nordveg, the North Way, originally referred to the sea route, not a kingdom. The terrain explains why. Mountains, fjords cutting deep into the landscape. The interior largely impassable. So power wasn't about controlling land, it was about controlling the coastal shipping lane itself, the North Way that ran from south to north.
At places like Avaldsnes in Rogaland, powerful chiefs built what archaeologists call royal manors, massive halls and boathouses positioned to be visible from the sea. These weren't homes, they were checkpoints. If you sailed the North Way, you passed these halls, and if you passed them, you paid tribute, or you explained why you shouldn't have to. Either way, the chief knew who was moving through his waters. This created intense competition. Every stretch of coastline, every narrows, every good harbor, potential wealth if you could control it. Far in the Arctic North, at Borg in the Lofoten Islands, archaeologists found one of the largest longhouses ever discovered in Scandinavia. Inside, gold from the continent, glass from the Rhineland. Proof that controlling northern resources, furs, walrus ivory, stockfish, made you wealthy beyond anything achievable through farming alone. This fragmented, hyper-competitive system created a society totally dependent on superior boat building and seafaring skills. Maritime technology wasn't just useful, it was survival. By 750 CE, the Northway chiefdoms had perfected the kind of ship-handling skills that would make Norwegian expansion to the west, Shetland, Orkney, the British Isles, almost inevitable.
So by 750 CE, we have three distinct power structures. Denmark, a consolidating kingdom with commercial ports and centralized authority. Svealand, a warrior aristocracy with proven ability to launch sailed expeditions across the Baltic. The North Way, fragmented but fiercely competitive coastal chiefdoms with unmatched maritime skills. None of them are Vikings yet. But every piece of what will become the Viking Age is now in place. We need to talk about belief, because technology and economics explain capability. They don't explain willingness. Warriors don't risk their lives just for silver. They do it for something deeper.
At Uppåkra, in what's now southern Sweden, though historically within the Danish sphere, archaeologists found something rare, a dedicated cult house.
Not a chief's hall with a sacred corner, a separate building rebuilt multiple times on the exact same spot for centuries. Buried in the post holes during construction, over 100 gullgubbar, tiny gold foils depicting human figures, offerings placed when the building was raised. Inside, deliberately buried near the hearth, a gold and silver beaker and a glass bowl from the Black Sea region. This wasn't someone's house, this was a temple. Just outside, archaeologists found caches of deliberately broken weapons, spears with bent points, shield bosses crushed, mirroring the ritual killing of weapons seen in sacred bog deposits like Nydam in the Danish region. This points to a formal religious system, dedicated sacred spaces, offerings, ritual specialists, the kind of institutional religion that binds communities together and gives actions cosmic significance.
But the most powerful ideology visible in this period wasn't in temples. It was in the boat graves. Vendel, Valskerbe. These burials are theatre, a carefully staged performance of identity. The boat, your vessel to the afterlife, the helmet, your crown, the weapons, your reputation made material, the animals, companions for the journey. This is the cult of the warrior aristocrat, where loyalty, reputation, and martial prowess aren't just valued, they're sacred. Your worth isn't measured in land or livestock, it's measured in glory. In the gifts your Lord gives you, in the reputation you build through deeds that will be remembered in poems and stories. Centuries later, the poet of Beowulf would capture this worldview perfectly. Better to earn glory before death, fame after life. That is the best memorial.
A brief note on sources. Later texts, the Eddas, written in the 1200s, describe gods like Odin, Thor, and Freya in vivid detail. But we can't use those texts to describe religion in 500 CE. They were written 700 years later, filtered through Christian scribes, shaped by centuries of cultural change. What we can say, the archaeology, cult houses, ritual deposits, warrior graves, is consistent with the themes of those later gods. The warrior cult we see at Vendel aligns with what later sources describe as Odin's Hall, Valhalla, where warriors feast and fight. The ritual behavior at Uppakara aligns with the formal priesthoods later sources describe. The myths aren't proof of what people believed in 500 CE. But they're not fiction either. They're echoes of something very real. By 750 CE, every piece is on the board. The technology, the clinker-built, keeled, sailed longship, a hybrid vessel with strategic range and tactical flexibility. It can cross oceans under sail, land on any beach, and row up rivers that are supposed to be natural defenses.
The economy. Coastal emporia like Ribe and Birka have reoriented Scandinavia toward maritime commerce. They've created demand for silver and exportable goods. They've provided the infrastructure where plunder can be converted into wealth. The ideology. A warrior aristocracy with a shared North Sea identity. A culture where reputation matters more than life, where dying well is better than living poorly. The proof. Salme, a Svear warband from the Mälaren Valley on a sailed ship, killed in battle in Estonia, 50 years before Lindisfarne. The system was operational. So why 793? Why Lindisfarne? Because by the 790s, the pieces aligned. Charlemagne's wars had militarized the Frankish heartland, but coastal defenses were stretched thin. Resources and attention were focused inland on conquest and consolidation.
England remained fragmented, Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex locked in rivalry, border regions poorly defended, coastal areas isolated from rapid military response. And scattered along those coasts, monasteries,
Wealthy beyond measure, filled with silver altarpieces, gold reliquaries, fine textiles. Lightly garrisoned, if at all. Politically isolated, attacking one didn't mean war with a kingdom, just outrage from a church with no armies. They were perfect targets. And the Scandinavians had everything they needed. The ships to reach them, the economy to monetize the plunder, the warrior ideology to justify the act. Imagine you're a monk at Lindisfarne in June of 793. You wake at dawn, shuffle to the chapel for prayers. The North Sea stretches grey and empty to the horizon, like it has every morning of your life. And then you see them. Not one ship, several. Sails catching the wind, cutting through the water faster than anything you've ever seen. They beach in minutes, no harbour needed, just sand and will. Men pour out, 40 per ship, armed, organised, moving with the efficiency of a machine that's done this before. Because they have.
For 50 years, this system has been running. Refined in the Baltic, perfected on smaller targets, waiting for the right opportunity. And on this grey morning in Northumbria, the Viking Age, it arrives. The Viking Age, traditionally dated 793 to 1066, reshaped Europe. It was forged over 5 centuries, in migrations that emptied regions and created power vacuums, in workshops where craftsmen perfected techniques passed down through generations, in graves where warrior aristocrats were buried with the symbols of an ideology that would echo across continents. It was built in the markets of Ribe, where silver first flowed through Scandinavian hands in quantities that created new appetites. It was perfected in the clinker-built hulls that evolved from the Nidam ship to the sailed warships of Salme. It was felt in the boat graves of Vendel, where families buried their dead with a message.
Next time, 793 to 830. Lindisfarne and the raids that followed, the first Frankish and English responses, and how the Danish kingdom, the Svear of the Mälaren region, and the coastal chiefdoms of the Norway exploited the opening in 3 very different ways. If this changed how you think about the Viking Age, subscribe and drop a comment. What surprised you most? The Salme brothers? The fact that the ship technology was 400 years old? The commercial revolution at Ribe?
Thanks to my first channel member, Josh Heath. Consider becoming a member to support the channel. Bye for now.